Culibao. Now, I mean, there's not much tape on Shayilan, unfortunately, but I was able to get my hands on a couple of his old fights, and I actually did make a video of a bunch of the fighters that were featured on UFC 261 with all the fighters coming over from the Shanghai PI on the Zhang Wei Li and Rose Namajunas card. So check that out. The fight against Zhongru, unfortunately, he does get knocked out pretty badly, but let's take a look at Josh Culibao. He's an 8-1-1 fighter. I think that draw was a very questionable fight, right? I think he looked really great in that first round, but then all of a sudden he kind of fades, right? And in those fights where you're seeing a guy who looks really good in the first against a guy who kind of brings it on in the second and third rounds, I mean, it takes some time for Jourdain to kind of find his footing, but in that second and third round, it felt like he did enough. Maybe I'm a little biased. Oh, Canada. But I do think that this is a fight where he could have come away with the victory. I mean, you had one judge give it 30-27 for Jourdain, one judge give it a draw, and then one guy give it 29-28 for Culibao. So still a relatively close fight, especially with that first round. But I think that in the Jalen Turner fight, you kind of saw something different, right? You saw the idea that he wasn't really so focused on kind of creating bigger exchanges because, I think there was a good size difference, and Jalen Turner was actually doing fairly well in that fight. The one thing I like about Culibao is he suffered an injury there, but his takedown defense is still, pretty pristine at that 100%. Got injured, got back mounted, and got finished on strikes, right? Happens to, pretty much anyone on a bad day. And I think that was the area where you kind of want him to improve, right? Such good fighters like Jalen Turner, Charles Jourdain, all guys that have seen some pretty good action with whether it's the Dana White Contender Series or the UFC. I think that Culibao has kind of earned the opportunity to fight someone on this level. You're seeing that a little bit now. I think that some fighters are getting really big opportunities to fight guys that maybe aren't getting opponents, that want to fight them. But in this case, it's like the opportunity for every guy to prove something of himself. And Shayilan's in that position, in my opinion. I mean, I'd be hella shocked if Culibao isn't the favorite here. I think he's got good power in his hands. He just can't fade, pick the shots carefully, keep your hands up, don't take anything too quick, because I also believe that Shayilan should have a speed advantage. I don't think he's going to have an MMA advantage at all. I think Culibao is going to be the better MMA fighter. And in fact, I think that if this fight does go to the ground, he should have a much bigger advantage. And maybe it's up to him to take it to the ground, right? If you go look at Shayilan's fights, I mean, that Road FC one that I did speak about, he did wrestle and he got his victory via ground and pound. So he has shown some of that, but that fight was in 2017, and since then it's very much been standing battles. And I do kind of question the quality of opponents, if you will. His last win, which was the knockout that got kind of, his excitement brewing, was against a 3-5 opponent. So when you're kind of 18-3, now you're taking on a 3-5 guy. I mean, that experience does play a part, I would say, in those types of fights. But now he's getting a guy who's pretty much, way under that type of number, closer to that halfway mark, and that 8-1-1. You could actually make the argument that Culibao's competition is a little bit better, right? I think that in the MMA realm of things, his level of competition, especially in the UFC, is significantly higher. I think the Rong Zhu fight, when you saw how he fights, on UFC 261, I mean, if that's any indication of, some consistencies across the board, big time strikers who don't really like to keep their hands high at the smaller weight classes, they seem to have a good speed advantage. So that's where I see how good Shayilan is. I think he's going to be a really good striker in this fight. But at the same time, I think that the size advantage, the experience, I do think that Culibao deserves to be a big favorite. Not a big favorite, but a significant favorite. At least around that minus 190, minus 200. Like, there's no question that he should be in that range, because just the experience alone in that 8-1-1 is significantly higher than 19-3. And looking at tape of both guys, you just have to give him the edge. And just sheer MMA quality, right? Technique, heart. I think he knows a lot more of what's going to be happening, even in terms of shifting your game plans, things like that. Just experience-wise, I don't think that Shayilan's going to be able to see as many looks that he's going to be able to get in the UFC now. So with that said, let's hop right into these lines. I'm kind of excited to see this one. And yeah, man, I mean, I'm pretty far off of the current line. I mean, the opening line was minus 225 at the plus 190 for Shayilan, but minus 275 now. If you really see something in Shayilan in that limited tape that's available, I mean, there's a pretty big dog there for you to ride, but I have to give the edge here to Culibao. Whether this is a bet to make, I'm not 100%. I do think that there's a potential for a finish here, and especially if those lines are getting kind of, juicy. Culibao has shown good power in the first rounds, especially early in that 1.5 type of round area. And Charles Jourdain has a chin for days, so I think that's where you have to give him a bit of credit, and he has some finishes on his record. So definitely a fight to look into. underrated, maybe not so much excitement coming out of it, you know, in the previous two, but I think there's some excitement to be gained heading into it, especially once we see the weigh-ins and see some tape. Hopefully that the UFC puts together something for Shayilan that maybe none of us have seen yet, but, you know, I think that's going to be a great one. Underrated fight for sure, but it should be an exciting one. And